The Bearded Woman. A journey through time it began, as most strange journeys do, in a place no one would expect. The Prado Museum in Madrid had always been filled with whispers, voices of the past echoing from the canvas. Shadows of kings, saints, and martyrs, staring at the present with cold, painted eyes. I had walked through those marble corridors countless times, and yet, that day felt different. Perhaps it was the way the light hit the walls, dim and uneven, as if the sun itself had tired of shining. And then, I saw her. The painting was massive, larger than life. At first glance, it seemed to depict a noble woman seated with calm dignity. But then the details struck me like lightning. The thick, dark beard covering her jaw and chin. The heavy brows, the strong hands. A baby clung to her skirt, while behind her, a silent man, her husband, stood in shadow. La Mujer Barbuda, the plaque read, The Bearded Woman, painted in 1631 by Jusepe de Ribera. Her name was Magdalena Ventura. I had heard whispers of her story. A woman from Abruzzo in Italy, ordinary once, who in her late 30s began to grow a full beard due to a rare condition we now call hirsutism. At the time, though, there was no science to explain it. To them, she was a monster, an omen, a living curiosity to be paraded in front of nobles. Ribera had been ordered by the Duke of Alcala to capture her likeness for eternity, an eternal exhibit of strangeness. But it wasn't the beard that held me frozen. It was her eyes. They were not ashamed, not broken. They were defiant. As I stared into those painted eyes, the room grew colder. The electric lights above flickered, then went out entirely. I blinked, startled, and in that instant the canvas seemed to ripple like water disturbed by a stone. A chill, sharp and sudden, wrapped around me. Before I could move, I felt myself pulled forward, swallowed by the darkness of the paint itself, and then silence. When I opened my eyes again, the world had changed. I was no longer in the Prado. The air smelled of smoke and livestock, the earthy tongue of a village long before gasoline and glass towers. Around me rose stone cottages, their roofs heavy with tiles, and in the distance, a bell tolled from a small church. A girl in a brown wool dress darted past me, her hair hidden beneath a shawl, carrying a basket of bread. Men in rough tunics hauled firewood across the dirt path. The year, I realized with a shiver, was no longer 2025. It was the 17th century. I had crossed into Magdalena's world. At first, I wandered through Abruzzo like a ghost, listening. The villagers whispered stories about a woman whose face no longer belonged to a woman. Some called her cursed. Others claimed she was chosen by God. But all agreed on one thing. She was not ordinary. One evening, drawn by flickering firelight, I found myself standing outside a stone house at the edge of the village. There, beneath the glow of the hearth, sat a woman. Her frame was broad, her hair black and long, and on her face, unmistakable even in the half-light, grew a shadow of beard. In her arms, a child stirred, and she rocked him with a lullaby, her voice low, husky, almost masculine, yet warm enough to still the night. It was her, Magdalena Ventura, alive, breathing. I froze, my heart hammering. The woman from the canvas, the so-called monster, was flesh and blood before me. But before she became the bearded woman, before the canvas imprisoned her forever, there had been another life. A life of simplicity, love, and laughter. And I would soon see it with my own eyes. Years earlier, Magdalena had been like any other young woman of Abruzzo. She grew up in a land of shepherds and olive groves, her hands rough from work, her spirit strong from the mountain winds. She was not considered a beauty. Her features were sturdy, her body tall and firm, but she was admired for her diligence, her calm gaze, and her kindness. When she married, the whole village gathered in the stone church. Bells rang, candles burned, and Magdalena walked the aisle in a dress of pale linen, her cheeks flushed with shy happiness. Her groom, a farmer of simple means, looked at her with nothing but pride. That day, no one saw anything unusual about her. She was a bride like any other, trembling with joy as vows were spoken. For years afterward, life was ordinary. She bore children, tended goats, cooked meals over the hearth. Her husband worked the fields. She wove cloth and cared for neighbors when they fell ill. To all, she was a capable wife, a devoted mother. But then, the first signs appeared. A single coarse hair on her chin. She plucked it out, embarrassed, and thought little of it. Months later, there were more. Darker, stronger. She tried again to remove them. But each time they returned faster, thicker. Soon, her upper lip bore a shadow like a young boy's. Then her cheeks. Her jawline. By her 37th year, the change was undeniable. Her body had betrayed her. Every morning she stared into the bronze mirror, watching her reflection shift into something alien. A woman's eyes, a woman's mouth, but framed by the heavy beard of a man. She tried to shave, but within days the hair returned, coarser than before. She drank herbal tonics from village healers, whispered prayers in the church, wept into her husband's chest. Nothing stopped it. Her husband, steadfast, held her and said, "You are still my Magdalena." His love did not waver. But love could not shield her from the whispers outside their door. Neighbors muttered, voices dripping with fear and curiosity. "She is cursed." No, she is a miracle half man, half woman. God punishes her, surely. Children laughed. Old women crossed themselves. Even her friends avoided her gaze. And though Magdalena tried to hold her head high, each stare cut deeper. What we now call hirsutism, a condition caused by an imbalance of hormones, was then a mystery, explained only by superstition. To them, Magdalena was no longer just a woman. She was the woman with the beard. And with that name came a fate she could never escape. That night, as I watched her from the shadows of her home, I understood the cruelty of time. Before history branded her a monster, she had been ordinary. Before the canvas, she had been a bride, a mother, a wife. But soon, the outside world would come for her. Soon, the Duke's messengers would arrive. And soon, Magdalena Ventura would leave this quiet village behind, dragged into the grandeur of Madrid, into the halls of the royal palace, into the gaze of the world that would never let her go. And I, unwilling though I was, would follow her. The whispers did not stay in Abruzzo. Stories have wings, and in the 17th century, they traveled along dusty roads with merchants, across taverns filled with drunken laughter, and on the lips of priests who relished the strange as evidence of God's mysteries. By the time the tale reached Spain, it had become legend. A woman in Italy whose face was bearded like a man, yet who bore children and lived as a wife. The Duke of Alcala, Don Fernando Afán de Ribera y Enríquez, was a man who adored curiosities. He collected books, relics, exotic animals from the New World, and stories that astonished foreign ambassadors. When he heard of Magdalena Ventura, he saw not a tragedy, but an opportunity. To summon such a woman to Madrid would show the reach of Spanish power, the marvels that existed under its watch. And so, one spring morning, horsemen rode into Abruzzo, carrying the Duke's seal. Their message was cloaked as a request, but the tone was unmistakable. Magdalena, her husband, and their child were to travel to Spain immediately. Magdalena resisted at first. She clutched her baby, shaking her head. "I am no spectacle," she whispered to her husband. But refusal was impossible. To defy the Duke was to invite ruin. They packed what little they had and set out. The journey was long, winding through the Apennines, across bustling ports, and over the Tyrrhenian Sea. Villagers along the way stared openly as she passed. Some spat, others crossed themselves, but most simply gawked, unable to look away. By the time she reached Madrid, she was exhausted, her spirit heavy with dread. The royal palace was unlike anything Magdalena had ever known. Towers pierced the sky, tapestries lined the walls, and courtiers strutted about in silks and jewels. But when Magdalena stepped into those halls, silence fell. Dozens of eyes turned toward her. A ripple of laughter broke the hush. "Is it true?" whispered a lady in waiting. "A woman with a beard thicker than a soldier's? Saints preserve us," muttered another. "What sort of creature has the Lord fashioned here?" Magdalena stood stiff, clutching her child. Her husband remained close, but even he seemed smaller in this world of grandeur. Soon, the Duke himself arrived. He was a tall man with piercing eyes, dressed in velvet trimmed with gold. He circled Magdalena slowly, like a collector examining a rare specimen. "Remarkable," he declared at last. "Truly, Spain is blessed to display such a wonder." With those words, Magdalena understood her fate. She was no longer a wife, no longer simply a mother. She was a trophy. Days turned into weeks, and Magdalena was shown off to visitors like an exotic beast. Nobles, scholars, and foreign envoys all came to see the bearded woman. They marveled, debated, scribbled notes in journals. "She defies the order of nature," said one. "She proves that God works in mysterious ways," said another. "Perhaps she is half man, half woman," someone suggested with a cruel chuckle. Not one of them asked her how she felt. Not one looked into her eyes and saw the person within. At court, Magdalena's presence served a purpose beyond spectacle. She was proof of Spain's dominance, a curiosity that showed the empire's wealth and reach. Where other nations displayed jewels or rare animals, Spain displayed a living woman marked as monstrous. For Magdalena, every appearance was torture. She could feel their stares crawling across her skin, stripping away her dignity. She tried to remain stoic, to keep her head high. Yet in the quiet of her chamber, she broke down. At night, she whispered to her child, "They see me as a beast, but to you, I will always be your mother." She pressed her bearded cheek against the boy's soft face, as if to remind herself that she was still human, still capable of love. Her husband, too, suffered. Once proud, he now lingered in the background, silent, powerless. He was reduced to a shadow, a figure in the corner of every room, while the world's eyes devoured his wife. One evening, as torches flickered in the courtyard, I found myself standing at the edge of a gathering. The Duke had assembled foreign guests, and once again, Magdalena was summoned. She walked in slowly, child in her arms, shoulders squared despite the humiliation. "Behold," the Duke announced, "a marvel of creation, proof that God's mysteries are infinite, and Spain's court the keeper of such wonders." Laughter and whispers swelled. A French envoy sketched her quickly, murmuring about publishing her likeness in Paris. A scholar from Flanders debated whether her condition was natural or divine punishment. Through it all, Magdalena said nothing, but her eyes burned. They locked on mine for the briefest moment, and I felt the weight of centuries in them. Rage, sorrow, defiance. It was then I realized, though they sought to make her a monster, she carried herself with the dignity of a queen. In time, the Duke decided that mere words were not enough. He wanted Magdalena immortalized, and so he summoned one of the greatest painters of the age, Jusepe de Ribera. The painter arrived in the spring of 1631. Jusepe de Ribera was no ordinary artist. Known as Lo Spagnoletto, the Little Spaniard, he had built his fame in Naples painting martyrs, beggars, philosophers, and saints with unflinching realism. His brush spared no flaw. Wrinkles, scars, twisted limbs, all were rendered with a brutal honesty that made viewers flinch. To some, it was genius. To others, cruelty. When Ribera entered the palace, his eyes fixed on Magdalena immediately. He did not look away in disgust like so many others, nor did he marvel with childish glee. Instead, his gaze was clinical, dissecting her with a painter's hunger. To him, she was not a woman, nor a monster. She was subject, form, texture, light. The Duke of Alcala welcomed him warmly. "You see before you," the Duke declared, gesturing at Magdalena, "a wonder unlike any in Christendom. Immortalize her, maestro, so that Spain may boast of this marvel for centuries." Magdalena's stomach twisted. She was to be painted, captured forever, not as a wife, not as a mother, but as a spectacle. The studio was prepared in a chamber with high windows. Sunlight poured through, casting long shadows across the floor. A heavy chair was placed at the center, draped with fabric. On the wall leaned Ribera's blank canvas, vast and expectant. Magdalena was summoned. She came with her infant in her arms and her husband at her side. The painter studied the scene, then nodded approvingly. "Yes," Ribera said softly. The child in her arms, the husband in the background. A composition of contrasts. Strength and tenderness, anomaly and normalcy. Perfect. He instructed Magdalena to sit. She obeyed, though every muscle in her body tensed. Her child squirmed, sensing her unease. Her husband lingered behind. His presence demanded, but minimized the shadow to complete the image. And then the painting began. For hours, Ribera worked. His brush moved with swift certainty, layering color upon color, shadow upon light. Each stroke etched Magdalena deeper into eternity. She sat as still as stone, her arms aching from holding the child, her back rigid. But inside, her thoughts raged. They want the world to see me like this, she thought. Not as I am, but as they have made me a beast, a marvel, a freak. They will look at me centuries from now and still not see a woman. Only the beard. At times, Ribera asked her to lift her chin, to turn slightly, to expose the lines of her face where the beard grew thickest. He painted the coarse black hair with painstaking detail, making it almost tangible. He emphasized her strong hands, her broad shoulders, the masculine traits that others mocked. Yet strangely, he did not strip her of dignity. In his rendering, her eyes held defiance. Her posture was solemn, almost regal. The very elements that others saw as grotesque, Ribera framed with gravity, even reverence. Still, Magdalena felt no relief. The days after Ribera's work were the hardest. The painting was complete, yet its weight hung over the palace like a storm cloud. Visitors came not to see Magdalena herself, but to see the portrait, to marvel at the painter's skill, to sneer or gasp at the likeness. She had become twice imprisoned, once in her own body and again on the canvas. It was during those nights, when the corridors fell silent and the torches burned low, that I dared to approach her chamber. Perhaps it was foolish after all. I was not meant to be here at all, in this century, in this life. But something compelled me. One evening, I found her sitting by the window, her child asleep beside her. The moonlight caught the curve of her beard, the hollow lines of her cheeks. She looked less like the monstrous figure whispered about in taverns, and more like a weary mother who had carried too much for too long. I cleared my throat softly. "Do you hate them?" I asked. Her eyes flicked to me. She did not startle. Perhaps she had already sensed me before this strange figure out of place, watching her life unfold. She studied me for a long while before answering. "Hate?" Her voice was low, husky. "What use is hate? It feeds no child. It silences no whisper." She looked down at her hands, broad and strong, the same hands that had once woven cloth, kneaded bread, cradled her son. Once, I was like any other woman. I wore a wedding dress. I trembled when my husband touched my hand. I laughed. I sang. And then, my own flesh turned against me. I said nothing. "They call me monster," she continued. "But tell me, what monster sings her child to sleep? What monster weeps when she is alone? What monster loves?" Her words struck me with the force of truth. To the world, she was an oddity, an aberration. To herself, she was simply a woman who had lost the right to be seen as one. "Do you ever wish you could go back?" I asked. A shadow crossed her face. Every day. To wake up once more with a smooth cheek. To feel a breeze without the itch of hair against my skin. To be looked at by my husband not with pity, but with desire. She paused, her voice cracking. "But wishing changes nothing. God has decided. Or so they tell me." We sat in silence for a long while. Outside, the city murmured in the distance, the clatter of carriages, the occasional bark of a dog. Inside, time seemed to stand still. At last, she turned to me. "Why are you here? You are not like the others. You do not stare at me as though I were a beast." I hesitated. How could I explain that I was from centuries ahead, drawn into her story by a painting that still hung in a museum far in her future, that I had come not by will, but by fate? "I came," I said finally, "because history remembers you only as an image, a curiosity. But I wanted to know the person behind the beard." Something softened in her gaze. For the first time, she smiled not the bitter curve of resignation, but something faint, fragile, almost grateful. "Then remember this," she whispered. "I am Magdalena Ventura. I am a mother. I am a wife. I am not a monster. Promise me you will carry that truth." My throat tightened. "I promise." She nodded, satisfied. Then, gently, she brushed her child's hair from his face and kissed his forehead. This boy, he is the reason I endure. If the world mocks me, so be it. But if he remembers me as his mother, nothing else matters. I wanted to reach out, to hold her hand, to tell her that centuries later, her story would not be forgotten, that there would be those who would see her not as a freak, but as a woman wronged by ignorance. But the words stuck in my chest. Instead, I watched as she closed her eyes, rocking her child slightly, humming a lullaby in a voice deep yet tender. And in that moment, I understood. Her defiance was not in loud declarations, but in the quiet act of continuing to love, even when the world tried to strip her of humanity. Night after night, I returned. Sometimes she spoke of her youth in Abruzzo, the rolling hills, the scent of olive trees, the warmth of festivals. Other times, she said nothing, and we sat together in silence, listening to the breaths of her sleeping son. But always, her eyes carried the same unspoken plea. See me, not the beard, not the spectacle, me. And I did. I saw her. The portrait was finished, yet it was only the beginning. News of Ribera's masterpiece spread like wildfire. Nobles, scholars, foreign ambassadors, everyone wanted to see it. The Duke of Alcala reveled in the attention. To him, the painting was proof of his court's magnificence, a trophy no other European noble could boast. And so the canvas was unveiled. Crowds gathered in the palace hall, craning their necks for a glimpse. Gasps rippled through the room as the cloth was pulled away, revealing Magdalena immortalized in oil and pigment. There she is, someone whispered, the bearded woman. The likeness was undeniable. Her beard, her broad frame, her solemn gaze all captured with merciless detail. But what made the crowd murmur most was her expression. The eyes, fierce and unbroken, challenging anyone who dared mock her. Some laughed nervously, others crossed themselves. A few even applauded, not for her, but for Ribera's skill. No one asked how she felt, standing only a few feet away as strangers dissected her existence. Magdalena watched in silence, her child clinging to her skirt. In that moment, she realized the cruel truth. The canvas had stolen her life. From now on, she was no longer a woman of flesh and breath. She was an image, an oddity to be remembered not for who she was, but for what she appeared to be. The weeks that followed were unbearable. Delegations came from across Europe to view both the painting and the woman herself. The Duke paraded her proudly. See how Spain keeps wonders even nature could not imagine, he declared. Magdalena endured, her face a mask of stoicism. But each whisper gnawed at her spirit. She looks like a man. Perhaps she is cursed. Imagine such a creature bearing children, how unnatural. They spoke as if she could not hear, as if she were not even present. At night, in her chamber, the weight of it all crushed her. She touched her beard with trembling fingers, loathing its coarse texture, yet unable to rid herself of it. She thought of her youth, her wedding day, the laughter of friends now long gone. How far she had fallen from a bride in white to a living curiosity, owned by a duke, immortalized as an aberration. Her husband grew quieter with each passing day. Once, he had told her she was still his Magdalena. But now, his words had dried up. He lingered in shadows, as Ribera had painted him present, but powerless, fading into the background of her tragedy. Only her son remained untouched, small enough not to understand the cruelty around them. He reached for her face with innocent hands, tugged at her beard with giggles. To him, she was not a monster. She was simply mother. It was for him that she endured. One evening, after yet another long day of scrutiny, Magdalena turned to me. I had remained near, unseen by others, a silent witness to her torment. Her voice was hoarse from silence, but her words were sharp as knives. "Do you see what they have done?" she asked. I nodded, unable to speak. "They have stolen me," she continued. "Not my body, for that was already theirs, but my soul. They have trapped it in that canvas. For centuries long after I am gone, people will look upon that painting and say, 'There was the bearded woman,' and not one will remember Magdalena, the girl who once danced at harvest festivals, who baked bread, who sang in church. No, only this." Her eyes glistened, but she did not cry. They have made me eternal, but not as I wished. Not as myself. I am immortal only as their monster. I wanted to tell her she was wrong, that centuries later, people would see her differently, with compassion, with understanding. But I could not lie. I had stood before that very painting in the Prado, and I knew she was right. Most did not see the woman. They saw the beard. Magdalena lowered her gaze to her sleeping child. She brushed his hair tenderly. If there is any justice, it will be in his memory. That he will not remember the stares or the laughter, but only that his mother loved him. The next day, more visitors arrived. Scholars debated her like a specimen. Some argued she was proof of divine punishment, others that she revealed nature's secrets. They spoke over her as though she were deaf, blind, absent. Magdalena sat still, her dignity intact. But inside, I felt her breaking. Each word stripped away another piece of her humanity. Each laugh cemented her as an object, not a soul. And yet, paradoxically, she endured with a strength that humbled me. Though trapped in the role forced upon her, she carried herself with a pride that even Ribera's cruel honesty could not erase. She would not bow her head. She would not let them see her despair. Perhaps that was her true defiance. Not escape, which was impossible, but survival. That night, I could not sleep. I kept seeing her face in the painting, the way Ribera had frozen her forever. But more haunting still was her face in the flesh, the quiet agony, the unspoken plea. Remember me as more than this. I realized then that my role was clear. I was here not only to witness, but to carry her truth across centuries. To see her as she wished to be seen. Not as the bearded woman, but as Magdalena Ventura. The palace no longer surprised me. I had seen its splendor, its cruelty, its endless parade of curiosities meant to amuse the nobility. Yet each day that passed, I felt the air grow heavier, as though Magdalena's sorrow seeped into the very stones. One night, I returned to her chamber once more. The halls were quiet, the torches burning low. Inside, her child slept, curled against her side. Magdalena sat awake, her eyes fixed on the moonlight spilling across the floor. She did not look at me when she spoke. "They will forget me," she said softly. "Not me, the woman, the wife, the mother. They will remember only the beard. That is all the world sees." Her fingers stroked her child's hair, trembling. "I can endure their stares. I can endure their laughter. But I fear." She paused, her voice breaking. "I fear my son will not remember me as I truly am. That he will grow, and when people whisper, 'Your mother was the bearded woman,' he will carry their shame as his own." The words pierced me deeper than any painting ever could. I stepped closer, though my presence was still something half phantom, half real in this time. "He will remember your love," I said quietly. "Children see truth more clearly than adults. He will remember your arms around him, your voice, your sacrifice." Her eyes finally lifted to mine. "Promise me," she said. "Promise me that when the world has forgotten, when they have buried me beneath their laughter, someone will tell my son, someone will tell the future, that I was not a monster." "I promise," I whispered, and I meant it with all my heart. She exhaled, closing her eyes. For a moment, she seemed at peace. The following days blurred into one another. More visitors arrived, more whispers filled the air. The painting was celebrated, debated, copied into sketches and words that would travel across Europe. Magdalena remained silent through it all, her dignity unbroken, but her soul weary. One afternoon, I found myself standing beside her as she looked once more at Ribera's portrait. She gazed at it for a long time, then murmured, "It is not me." Yet even as she said it, I realized it was and was not. It captured her face, her beard, her form. But it missed her essence, the lullabies, the laughter she once had, the warmth she gave her son. Paint could not hold the fullness of her humanity. Still, she knew and I knew that the world would remember only the image, not the woman. That night, something changed. As I drifted into uneasy sleep in a shadowed corner of the palace, the air thickened. The walls around me seemed to pulse. The torches flicker unnaturally. A sound faint at first, then louder. The tolling of a bell, though no church bell rang at that hour. I sat up, my chest tightening. The painting in the grand hall flashed in my mind, the same ripple I had seen in the Prado centuries later. A chill swept over me. It was time. I did not want to leave. Not yet, not like this. But the pull was undeniable, as though the canvas itself had opened once more. I hurried to Magdalena's chamber. She was awake, sitting in silence. Perhaps she sensed it too, the strange shift in the air, the thinning of the veil between centuries. She looked at me, eyes steady. "You are leaving." My throat closed. Yes. For the first time since I had met her, tears welled in her eyes. "Then remember me. Not the beard, not the painting. Me." I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. She leaned down, kissed her son's forehead, then looked back at me. "Carry my truth into the future. Let them know I was a mother, a wife, a woman who loved." The air shimmered. The pull grew stronger. My vision blurred, the room dissolving into darkness. Her last words followed me like a prayer. "Do not let them call me monster." And then she was gone. When I opened my eyes, I was back in the Prado. The electric lights hummed overhead. The crowd shuffled past in hushed tones, admiring paintings without understanding them. Before me hung Ribera's La Mujer Barbuda. Magdalena stared out from the canvas, her beard dark, her gaze defiant. The same eyes I had seen, the same sorrow, the same strength. But I knew something the others did not. I had sat with her, spoken with her, heard her fears and her love. She was not just the bearded woman. She was Magdalena Ventura,